Good afternoon and welcome to the Newsroom Pub. I'm Maryann Lazarski, president of the Milwaukee Press Club. I'm really glad to see a full house here today, and I'm happy to be here today with Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson. Before we get started, I want to thank our event sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is Spectrum News 1. Our supporting sponsor is We Energies. I would also like to thank our event partner, WizPolitics.com. WizPolitics.com partners with the Press Club for this luncheon as part of its ongoing event series in Milwaukee, sponsored by UW Milwaukee, Wisconsin Academy of Global Education and Training, 1125 at the Pabst, Medical College of Wisconsin, and Spectrum. And now I would like to introduce our media panel. First is Alison Dirr from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, Edgar Mendez from Neighborhood News Service, and Peter Zervakis from Spectrum News 1. And now, without further ado, please welcome Mayor Johnson.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a great day to join you all here for the Newsmaker Luncheon. I always enjoy having the opportunity to come here as an attendee myself, or even as this featured speaker, which we've done at least once or twice. So again, thank you for having me here. Since I took office, we've been making news in Milwaukee. The last year has been certainly newsworthy. The last several weeks have been newsworthy. The weeks to come will be newsworthy. And certainly, of course, as you all have been paying attention to, this week has been newsworthy as well and will continue to be newsworthy. It was newsworthy this week because, as you have seen, the Milwaukee County Council took up and passed a 2% city sales tax ordinance that they've now forwarded to me, and I will sign that ordinance tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock at Mitchell Street Library on the south side of our city. And that action that the council took was unprecedented. It was extraordinary because finally it puts the city of Milwaukee in a position to have the same sort of revenue-generating tools that virtually every other major metropolitan city in the United States has. Our comparable cities across the country have this tool, and now finally the city of Milwaukee will be able to have this tool to diversify our revenue streams as well. And it puts us in a position to give us the opportunity to focus on Milwaukee's future, to build a safer and even more economically vibrant city, not just for folks in this room, but for folks in neighborhoods all across Milwaukee. We've continued to make news as well as it relates to public safety in Milwaukee, too. And when I got elected, I decided to have a new format for reporting that out. You all in this room know full well that every quarter we report those numbers. Myself, Milwaukee Police Chief Jeffrey Norman, Ashanti Hamilton, Director of the Office of Violence Prevention. That'll be coming next week, so we'll continue to make news there. Just as a small note before we get to that, next week, homicides in the city of Milwaukee are down about 30% when compared to this time last year. Now, that means there's still work to do. I'm not celebrating that, but it is noteworthy that some of the initiatives that we've been embarking on in public safety in Milwaukee have seemed to help to drive crime down, drive homicides down in Milwaukee. And that's good news for people all across the city. So in addition to enforcement, which you all know and I know as well, we can't just rely on that. We cannot just rely on a punitive approach. It has to be a mix. We have to have other tools in our toolkit in order to address the issue of public safety in Milwaukee as well. It's a complex issue, and it requires complex solutions. So some of those are things that we have initiated and things that we've continued and improved on since I've taken office as mayor. Certainly, again, there's the Office of Violence Prevention and the new initiative that they've got, the Promise Keepers who go out into neighborhoods and really reach out to folks in hard-hit areas of our city. Another is our Camp Rise program, which is now in its second year and reaches out to kids in Milwaukee as young as 10 years old. And we may be the only major city in the United States that's doing workforce development with kids as young as 10 to 13 years old. And the reason that we focused in on kids in that age range is because a couple, last year or the year before, I saw a news story where someone had gone into a classroom and asked kids, and these are young men of color, at that young age, how many of you have been involved with crime or violence? How many of you have stolen a car, been in a stolen car, know somebody who's stolen a car? And every single hand in that room went up. And I said that we needed to have a different way where we approached public safety, where we reached out to those young people and did it at a younger age in their life. I know the importance of that. That's why I continue to wear, you guys have probably heard me say this a number of times, this green YMCA wristband, because early on in my life, I got involved in a pre-college program that really helped to put me on the trajectory that I've been on ever since. So I know the importance of that. We brought that same sort of value to the mayor's office when I took the office. We're about a year out from the Republican National Convention happening in Milwaukee. And it's actually, kind of interesting that we've got, all these folks from across the United States, all these folks from across the country, and indeed across the world who are descending upon Milwaukee now, and certainly will be here this weekend for the 120th anniversary of Harley-Davidson here in our city. Sort of like a test run for this other large-scale event that we'll be having in Milwaukee in about a year. My thought on that, as I've been involved in these discussions, and high-level staff in my administration have been intricately involved in these discussions, is that we're pretty well organized, and I've got confidence that all the work that we're putting in will make sure that we have an event, a Republican National Convention, that is safe for all and will reflect positively on us in the city of Milwaukee and the story that we have to tell as well. I know that the host committee now is reaching out to local businesses, and from the outset, I've said this is important because the decision to host the RNC, even though I'm a Democrat and not a Republican, the decision to host it and for me to support it was purely about our economy. It was purely about our economy. It was purely about business. It was purely about jobs and the economic impact that that event would have on some city in the United States. And I said, why not? Why shouldn't we benefit from that? Why shouldn't Milwaukee be the beneficiary of over $100 million of economic development, of economic impact on our community? I think the right answer to that was yes, and now we're on the verge in about a year of having that convention, all its attendees, and all that economic impact benefiting our businesses and our workers on the ground in Milwaukee. And I think, as I've said from the outset as well, I think this opens the door for other large-scale political, sports, entertainment, business conventions to look at, to consider, to actually choose Milwaukee. Places that perhaps didn't even think about coming to Milwaukee in years past. I think this opens the door for them to look at our city as a place to come and do business. And I think that's a great thing, again, for our businesses on the ground and for our workers here in Milwaukee, too. And before we get to questions, I just want to share a note about my optimism for Milwaukee. I've talked about this before. I am extremely optimistic about the future of our city. I really, really am. Before coming here just this afternoon, I was on the south side in Bayview, and I was delivering a proclamation for an emotional support dog that a veteran had that was supporting other people who live in the city of Milwaukee, supporting other veterans. Now that's Milwaukeeans looking out for Milwaukeeans. It's people in our city caring about and supporting other people in our city. And then taking the ride on the Hone Bridge, as I've done so many times, considering that I was a student at Bayview High School, and heading back north to downtown here, you could look out on the landscape and see literally hundreds of millions of dollars of development that's happening. Cranes in the sky, supporting things where people will work, supporting things where people are getting new opportunities to skill up in the construction trades, supporting opportunities in manufacturing, supporting so many things in our city, including large-scale conventions, including housing. I got a lot of optimism about what's going to happen in Milwaukee. We've got a strong economy now. I'm looking forward to having a stronger economy in the future. And I think all these things, all these opportunities that are underway will lead to us having stability in Milwaukee, and that stability, especially with family-supporting job opportunities, will lead to stability in people's lives. And when people have stability in their lives, then that creates stability in neighborhoods. And when neighborhoods are stable, that creates a system where folks talk to each other. Those neighborhoods gel, they become cohesive. And when neighborhoods gel and become cohesive, That's how we get to the greater public safety that all of us want. And when we get a critical mass of that happening, that encourages more businesses to locate here, that encourages more opportunity to come here, that encourages more people to lay down roots in the city, that encourages growth in a city and helps us to get to my goal of growing the city's population towards 1 million people. So thank you all so much. Appreciate your listening, and I'm happy to have some questions.
Mayor, thank you so much for being here and taking our questions today. I wanted to start with the sales tax. You were obviously deeply involved in the negotiations in Madison. You had spoken with Speaker Voss, with Governor Evers, with the Senate Majority Leader. I guess, while there is a sales tax, that's something you've pushed really hard for. There are obviously a lot of policy provisions aimed at the city. I wonder, do you have any regrets about that legislation and the negotiation process, given given these restrictions that the city now has?
I have said from the beginning in my private conversations in the negotiating room with Speaker Voss and with Senator Lemahue and anybody across the table in the legislature who would listen, my strong aversion to the policy provisions. I think they were totally, completely unnecessary, didn't need to happen. A large part of the reason why we're in this position right now is because the state broke its promise, the promise that was made way back in 1911 to send an appropriate amount of money back to local governments in terms of shared revenue. They broke that promise over 2 decades ago, and that's put Milwaukee in a financial situation. And it's not just Milwaukee, right? Other communities around the state, large communities like ours, mid-sized cities, small communities, villages, and towns, they all have faced these same sort of problems. In fact, I know that I was talking with a suburban mayor in Milwaukee County just this week and said that even with the increase in shared revenue, they still, in the next few years, will be looking down the pike towards insolvency, going off the same sort of fiscal cliff that we were talking about. So do I like the policy provisions in here? No. I'm the first African American to be elected mayor of the city of Milwaukee. And our financial predicament opened the door for Republicans to introduce policy provisions that, if they had come to us, or I'm certain to their Democratic colleagues in the legislature or the governor presently, everybody would have scoffed at. Folks would have said, absolutely not, no way, no how, never going to happen. But at the end of the day, it's my responsibility, and I ran on this, was to build better relationships with Madison, was to put us in a position where we solve this decades-old fiscal challenge that the city of Milwaukee faced. Ultimately, that's what we accomplish. The mission to put the city on a fiscally solvent path was accomplished. And do I like the policies? No, I still dislike the policies. I wish that they were not there in the beginning, and I wish that they were not there presently.
And so Milwaukee County actually didn't have a lot of the policy provisions that were aimed at the city. Do you think that there were missteps by the city that allowed the policy provisions that are now applying to your government and not Milwaukee County?
No, I don't. And this is the reason why I don't. The reason that I don't is because while the city of Milwaukee's got a much bigger target on its back, right? It's the city of Milwaukee. It's different than Milwaukee County. Milwaukee County, while of course the city is within it, is not the same. When I look at the folks across the table who were hell-bent on implementing these sort of policy provisions on Milwaukee, they had a desire to do this, and they did it because they knew that we were handicapped. So it didn't really matter if they did it to the city or if they did it to the county. Their point is that they wanted to do it and that there was an opening to do it. And it's not just the city. Certainly there are some provisions that affect Milwaukee County. There are provisions that affect other communities in the state of Wisconsin as well. But then you look outside of the effects on local units of government. I mean, Speaker Voss I don't know if he's back yet, but he was just in Belgium talking to European leaders because he's the president of the National Conference on State Legislatures, right? This is a national platform that Republicans have put forward to attack diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, you look at the University of Wisconsin system and all the attacks on DEI that the Republicans have pushed forward on the University of Wisconsin. I mean, after the Supreme Court nullified affirmative action, then the legislature, Speaker Voss in particular, stepped up and said, hey, we'll take more actions to do away with scholarships that are geared towards minority students, right? This is a national platform that is in effect not just in the city of Milwaukee or towards the city of Milwaukee, but statewide in Wisconsin and indeed in other states across the United States. So no, I don't feel that there were missteps by the city. Look, the city has been trying to accomplish this for like 4 decades, getting more revenues to the city government in our coffers. It has never happened before. And I wish, it really is my wish and my desire that this was handled 15, 20 years ago, whatever it was, when Democrats had control of the Assembly, had control of the state Senate, and had control of the governor's office. That didn't happen, unfortunately. So I didn't choose the political dynamic of the day, but we're in it. And it's my responsibility to solve it, to get something for the city to stand on in the future. And if we didn't do this, if this did not happen, we would be in a very difficult situation trying to deliver services. In fact, we wouldn't be able to deliver the same level of services as we do today because we would have seen like half of our police department cut. We would have seen a quarter of our fire department cut. We would have seen virtually our entire library system dissolved. That's not the sort of future that I want for Milwaukee. So we put ourselves, I believe, in a situation where we can provide those services and live to fight another day, as has been said recently.
Hi, Mayor Johnson. So you mentioned those provisions. There had been talk about the city potentially filing lawsuits to limit the impact or maybe even prevent some of these provisions from happening. Now that you're signing the sales tax into law tomorrow, is that still on the table?
Look, I think that there are opportunities for us to still have our values met. There are still opportunities for us to work with the private sector, for us to work with others in order to continue to have diversity, equity, inclusion programs in the city of Milwaukee. I believe with all my being that there are opportunities to do that. And I will continue to fight to seek for opportunities to do that. But whatever sort of route we take in terms of challenging these policy provisions, those things are already being discussed. In fact, one of the things that I have already supported is getting our intergovernmental relations team to turn around and go back to the legislature to seek the repeal of those policy provisions. So I think that there are opportunities for us to get around those pieces, and we're discussing the opportunities right now.
Mayor Johnson, good to see you.
Hi, Pete.
I've heard you talk about shared revenue for a long time now. You alluded to it, and you've also been talking about better relations with Madison for a long time. So now that the shared revenue deal has been passed, you're about to sign the sales tax into law. Is there another area where you think you could use those new, better relations with Madison when Milwaukee and Madison have for a long time, there's been some strain between the city and state capital? Is there another issue that's now top priority for you to work on?
That's a great question, Pete. It really, really is. And look, I have, when I came into office, again, touched on public safety and the importance of public safety and have been very transparent, very open with our reporting on crime and our desires to increase public safety in Milwaukee. Myself and Chief Norman, as I said before, and Ashanti over at Office of Violence Prevention, we go out every quarter and report on this stuff. But there is a problem, right? The problem is that at the local level, we don't control gun law. I get all the text messages and phone calls. I do. All throughout the day, especially all throughout the night, about people who have been shot, people who've been killed. And most of that happens by firearms in the city of Milwaukee. Yet the council, we don't control gun law. But everybody looks at us, and my challenge to our friends in the press is that instead of simply coming to us, and certainly we have to do our part with programming like Camp Rise we talked about to address this on the front end, my challenge to you is for you guys to have those same sort of questions for the people who do control gun law. Right? Those are the folks who have the majorities in our legislature in Madison, and of course the folks at the federal level as well, to see what they are doing about access to guns for people who clearly should not have them. So it'd be my desire to do something else that the city has been unsuccessful in doing for a long time in Madison, and that's getting the legislature to act on guns. Now, I have said from the beginning, I have to be a political realist, right? I have to understand the lay of the land of Madison. So I know going into it that it would not be some sweeping legislation on guns that I or perhaps others might like to see. But we have to do something more than what the status quo is. The status quo where I'm seeing, and all of us are seeing and witnessing, people being shot fatally or non-fatally every single day. It's too much. It's been too much. Right? We shouldn't live in a city, in a state, or a society where parents have to hold their kids really tightly when they send them to school because the ease in which people can get guns and potentially be a mass shooter at a school. And I could tell you, I've got 3 kids, a rising 8th grader and rising K5ers. Is that K5ers? And after Uvalde. When my girls were going to school, I was devastated. My wife and I, we struggled with the idea to send our kids to school. And parents shouldn't have to think about that. If you're in Milwaukee, if you're in a suburban community, if you're in a rural part of our state, we have an issue with guns that we have to address. That issue is more acute in a place like the city where there's a higher density of people and folks have such easy access to guns. But there's something that I believe can be done and should be done. And I want to approach the legislature and use these newfound relationships to see if there is anything that we can do, something more than what presently is happening, so that we see a decrease in the number of people who have access to guns who should not have access. I'm not talking about taking people's guns away, right? That's not going to happen. We live in the United States of America. And there are more guns than there are people, right? I get that. What I'm asking for is to, from this point forward, try to find some area of common ground, some area of common sense where the people who should not have access to guns don't get them. And if they don't get them, then guess what? They won't have the ability to use guns and go and hurt people and hurt kids and hurt innocent bystanders and do stupid stuff with guns that cost people injury or death. That's what I want to work on with the legislature.
You've also talked about the, I guess, on the sales tax bill, and in your earlier comments, you talked about police and fire. If the city does not maintain police and fire, it stands to lose tens of millions of dollars, and that's not what's budgeted. Those are the people who are actually on staff. I'm looking for you to explain to us, how do you do that, especially given that there are challenges with retention, especially in policing right now?
I think, so right now we're in a very interesting position as it relates to policing. And we're in an interesting position as it relates to policing is because we're, roughly at the end of the career span for the ballooned number of folks who came into law enforcement in the 1990s, right? They're hitting their 25-year mark, and so some of them are deciding to retire. But it's my desire as mayor to make sure that we have public safety in Milwaukee. And a large part of public safety, our public safety apparatus, means that we need to have police, means that we need to have law enforcement. That's why I've been a champion for COPS grants in the past. That's why I've been a champion of making sure that we increase opportunities in the city of Milwaukee to go and recruit people to serve in those very valuable, very important roles of public safety in Milwaukee. So we'll have to double down on our efforts to make sure that we're recruiting people to serve in the position of firefighter as well as police officer in the city of Milwaukee. And that's what my commitment is. And I think, it's not just my commitment just because I'm here saying it. I think that's what the people of Milwaukee want as well. I can remember a time when we were considering a COPS grant in Milwaukee, and there were a lot of angst, there were a lot of protests and things like that. And I actually went door to door and talked to my constituents about it. And they told me at the time, they said, Chevy, we're so grateful that you are our alderman at the time, because our opinion, and this is my district on the northwest side of the city, our opinion is that we need police. We want to have police. We just want to have police who value us, who treat us with the same sort of dignity and respect as they would treat citizens in more affluent neighborhoods in our city or elsewhere. So that's what my commitment is, and that's what we'll work towards, is working to make sure that we bring on the police officers to satisfy the maintenance, and firefighters to satisfy the maintenance of effort requirements as required by the law.
And so in terms of retention, not just gaining people on those two departments, are you open to increasing salaries? Are you open to increasing benefits? Like, how do you ensure that you don't actually fall below the year before in terms of staffing?
Yeah, I think we'll have to take a concentrated look at everything that we can to encourage police officers to stay. One of the things and firefighters as well, it's always important to make sure that we include firefighters because they play an enormously important role in public safety in Milwaukee, too. It's not just police, it's also firefighters as well. One of the benefits, I think, of the bill is the fact that police officers and firefighters and future city employees generally will be a part of the state of Wisconsin's retirement system. We'll do a soft close on the city's retirement system, and all new employees, including police fire, will go into the state of Wisconsin retirement system, WRS. That, I think, presents an opportunity for police, including former Milwaukee police officers who, I'm hearing, may have thought that the grass was perhaps greener on the other side, but have seen that there's not as much opportunity for growth. There's not opportunity for advancement, and would like to come back, but sometimes don't want to interact with having to, go from pension system to pension system. So this, I think, will present an opportunity where we'll be able to have some latitude to pull former Milwaukee police officers back into the city of Milwaukee as well.
Mayor Johnson, there will likely be an increase in police and firefighters in coming years, but the Fire and Police Commission, which oversees those departments, as part of the shared revenue bill, will see a reduction in their powers, in particular the power to set policies, which will be shifted to the chiefs. How do we ensure that any new policies set forward are equitable and that there's not an abuse of those powers and that people are being held accountable still?
Sure. That's another great question. I'm glad you asked it. I think you do it by this. Well, first of all, let me just go back to my original point and say that was one of those policy provisions that I disagreed with and thought was unnecessary, but still Republicans thought it necessary to include it in Wisconsin Act 12. But the way that you do that is this, right, is that if a police chief or a fire chief who now has this authority under the law to set policy for their respective departments, if they were to step out of bounds, if they were to step out of line, if they were to do something that was egregious with their powers, with their policy setting powers, the Fire and Police Commission still has the ability to call a hearing on those policies, right, and have some public testimony on them so that there's the knowledge of what the public perceives before those policies were to go into place. Another thing is that the Common Council has the ability to step in on those policies and at least delay the implementation of those policies. And those chiefs, whether it's fire or police, were they looking for reappointment to stay in their positions, the Fire and Police Commission still has authority for appointing those those chiefs of those various departments. So there are a couple of checks still that are available to the Fire and Police Commission to exert some authority on police chiefs and fire chiefs of the future to make sure that they don't step out of line with their policy-making power.
Mayor, I think after the shared revenue stuff, the topic that gets brought up to me the most when people see me and want to talk, what's in the news in Milwaukee has actually been the recent change to hours for food trucks and food carts. I know you mentioned homicides down about 30%. You mentioned some of the programs that you think are to credit for that. Do you think that ordinance is working? Because a lot of those operators said it is costing them a pretty prime slot of revenue, an hour of revenue when people are exiting the bars. Do you think it's making Water Street safer?
Yeah, even going back to my days on the council, there were problems with food trucks. And that's not to say that all food trucks are bad actors. We have some excellent and tasty food trucks in Milwaukee, and they deserve a lot of credit, a lot of praise. But it was really an unregulated or not well-regulated part of our local law here. And so we went in and did some fixes to create the opportunity for food trucks to still have opportunity to sell their goods in Milwaukee, but created some order, created some structure, and not allow for, or give an incentive rather, for people who were at bars late into the night, who had been drinking, who were looking for an extra meal, or fourth meal, Taco Bell used to call it years ago. We're looking for an opportunity for them to move on and to not congregate and to not cause problems. For too many people, that was the issue. That was a problem downtown. And so I think it is helping to make Water Street and other districts around the city safer.
Would you consider, during the RNC, is there a chance they could be allowed to stay out later again?
We'll see what the future holds on that. Nobody's come to me and asked that. Maybe somebody's been asking you that and they told you to ask. I don't know, but we'll see. Of course, we'll have to work with the council on that if that's a desire. Certainly for bars, they would be staying open later. That was the desire in the DNC for them to stay open until 4 o'clock. I believe the same thing is true for the RNC as well.
I do have one more sales tax question for you. So the city, if the sales tax is implemented, or I guess I should say when, because you're going to sign it, plus the shared revenue the city is going to get would amount to an approximately $215 million increase in the city revenue. But you haven't committed that there won't be cuts in 2024. Can you explain that?
Well, I want to make sure. The reason for that is just because these are all estimates. These are all estimates still. Like there's not been a City of Milwaukee sales tax. And while I am hopeful and desiring that the Department of Revenue has very accurate estimates, we haven't seen that just yet. So would it be I guess to help you, Alison, with your question, would it be my desire to have cuts? No, it would not be. But I want to make sure before I commit to something like that I see what the dollar amount is that comes in, because again these are all just estimates. The shared revenue I think is probably a little more accurate, but the sales tax, well, it's just an estimate as of now.
So you have to propose a budget at the end of this year for 2024. The sales tax goes into effect January 1st, 2024. So are you saying you're not planning to factor in the sales tax until after 2024?
I'm saying I need to continue to have conversations with our budget office and dig deeper into the budget process before I make a commitment to that.
So between 2017 and 2022, there was a 67% decrease in drug-related arrests by MPD. Now, last year in the county, there were over 650 fatal drug overdoses. But last year, there were only 80 arrests for opiate or cocaine sales, which are responsible for the great majority of the fatal overdoses. I understand that drug abuse, drug addiction is a public health issue, but how do we reduce those number of fatal drug overdoses when oftentimes drug dealers are operating without consequence in the city?
That's a great question, and one that I think deserves for us to have a deeper, more sympathetic touch on. And the fact of the matter is that in my administration and working very closely with the fire department, we have been doing just that. This is an issue that affects the city of Milwaukee certainly, but affects our county and affects our state and affects communities across the United States. Right, the ease to kill with a drug as potent, a drug as powerful as fentanyl. And so the city of Milwaukee, I believe, has been on the forefront with working to make sure that those responsible for opioids have been held to account. And there have been lawsuits all around the city and the county, and I believe the state as well has created some lawsuits that have generated dollars that we've poured back and will continue to pour back into efforts to combat this very issue. One of the things that we've done to tackle the issue is to make sure that any person, anybody, it doesn't even matter who you are. If you go to one of our fire stations, go to one of our firehouses, go to an ambulance that's out there in the field, you can ask for a hope kit that has these tools to help individuals who may come into contact with fentanyl to save lives. That's the sort of approach that we've been taking as it relates to this. But again, I think it requires it requires much more than a punitive approach. It requires our compassion, and that's the sort of direction that we've been headed in, working with our partners again, not just on the city council, but also in the fire department and others too.
Mayor, I'm going to ask you for a bit of inside info here. I don't know how much you'll be able to share, but it's really striking how many businesses have moved or renovated offices downtown. I mean, obviously, we see the BMO Tower now really realizing its potential post-COVID. Milwaukee Tool's new building is spectacular. Northwestern Mutual, Fiserv, Bright Heights, some of the other ones. Is there something in the city's pitch that's beyond just the face value that we all think of, okay, well, you got more restaurants on your lunch break and you got better access from all directions on the freeway? I mean, is there something else that the city is using as kind of its secret sauce to pitch businesses to come down here?
Well, if I tell you that, Peter.
That's why I said inside info. Maybe a sneak peek.
If I told you that, then somebody else may try to copy us and try to pull. Well, look, I have said from the beginning of my administration that I want to get to yes. So for businesses that are out there, whether you're in the city of Milwaukee and want to expand, whether you're in the suburbs and want to move your locations into the city, which I think that you all should, or whether you're a business elsewhere in the country that's looking for a new home, Milwaukee is here. Milwaukee is ripe, and we want to get to yes. We want to get to yes, and that's exactly what we've done. We've cut through red tape. We've gotten through challenges with a number of the big businesses that you talked about. Whether that's the couture that's rising out of the ground, we work to get that done. Whether it's Milwaukee Tool, we work to get that done. Whether it's Pfizer, we work to get that done. We had open arms for Right Height to come into Milwaukee. Kohl's that's opening its format store downtown, and will replicate this likely in other communities across the United States. We're an administration that wants to get to yes, working with our business community, because we understand the value of business. We understand the value of those opportunities being available to citizens in Milwaukee, and those opportunities creating stability, again, like I pointed to earlier, in their lives, then therefore in their family and in their neighborhood, and how all of that contributes to the greater public safety. And I think that businesses see that, they're buying into that. And when you talked about face value, I thought you were talking about this face, but they see that, they value that, they know that we are business friendly, that we are open for business in the city of Milwaukee, and I think they want to be a part of that energy, and I think that's what's going on.
I guess kind of going off of his question, how do you make downtown more attractive to office workers?
How do you make downtown more attractive to office workers? I think that there are things that we can do inside of government. I think that there are things that are happening outside of government as well that makes downtown more attractive to office workers, but not just office workers who are in their offices and coming downtown as a place to work, but also as a place to live as well. And some of those things are these, right? You be supportive of things like 3rd Street Market Hall, which is an incredible space in Milwaukee. And look, I know later this year there are business groups from communities across the country who are coming to Milwaukee to learn about how we are doing things. Last year we had Oklahoma City that came here. Later this year, we've got a delegation coming from Portland to Milwaukee to figure things out. I just got a text message the other day from the mayor of Salt Lake City who's coming here as well, because they want to see what the successes are in Milwaukee, because they want to replicate some of that stuff. So you're supportive of things like that. You're supportive of things like the downtown dog park that's coming along here. You're supportive of new residential units coming to downtown, whether that's affordable housing, which we need in downtown, or whether it's market rate luxury apartments that are rising out of the ground right now. You make it more attractive by doing what I've said from the beginning and having people-focused, people-centered infrastructure, including protected bike lanes, actual protected bike lanes, not just in downtown, but in neighborhoods too, that separate the bicycle users from cars. You do that by encouraging green space, by having a better canopy protection. And we do a great job, I think, in Milwaukee with this pearl of jewels along the lakefront. You make sure that places like that remain accessible to the public. You do that by having great public transportation options, not just the bike lanes, but also buses. So I give a huge round of applause and commend Milwaukee County for the Connect One, the East-West Bus Rapid Transit that's going on right now, and the other transit opportunities that are available downtown. You do that by supporting things like bubbler bikes that's here for people who don't have their own bicycle. It's all of these things collectively and together that makes downtown a vibrant place where people want to work, but then also want to live. I've talked about this before as well, is that cities are not meant to just transport people from one suburb to the other, one community to the other. Like, you're not supposed to it's not supposed to be flyover country. People are supposed to experience cities, and there's supposed to be vibrancy in cities. And you're supposed to see people walking and spending time with each other and doing commerce in cities. And that's the sort of that's what we want to grow in Milwaukee. And downtown plays a major role in that. And that's the sort of future for downtown and the city overall that we're building and we want to see.
So we're talking about making downtown more attractive. Well, downtown has seen a great deal of investment over the past decade or longer, but there are many other areas in the city, particularly many on the north side, that have seen little investment or much less investment. So how do we make those areas more attractive for business owners, for housing developers, and how do we improve the quality of life for residents in those neighborhoods?
That's a great question. It really, really is. And you do the same sort of formula that you're talking about downtown, right? So when I think about what's happening in the neighborhoods, I have always believed from the time that I've been in office and even before it, that there are places in Milwaukee on the north side and the south side that have so much potential. I've always thought that Villard Avenue on the north side could be Brady Street North, and Mitchell Street on the south side could be Brady Street South. I think those streets have so much energy, so much potential for growth, and I want to see those streets and others live up to their full potential. But it's not just places like that. You got to invest in housing and affordable housing, again, not just downtown, but in the neighborhoods as well. That's why when I was council president, we put together the spending package on ARPA that we did that my administration is now executing on as mayor. And our Homes MKE program, where we're taking 150 city-owned, tax-foreclosed properties that are not supporting our efforts, that really are a drain on us because we have to cut the grass, we have to shovel the snow, we have to board the properties up, we have to put out fires there and the like. We're taking those properties, we're working with developers and many times minority developers and nonprofit organizations. We're fixing those properties up, and then we're selling those properties at affordable rates to people to live in the neighborhoods, adding, again, stability, which has been a theme here, a through line, adding stability in neighborhoods, right? When I talk about the need to have people-centered infrastructure and these same sort of protected bike lanes that actually increase people's quality of life, because there's a new mechanism, there's new infrastructure in place for them to get around without being dependent on a car. That's coming to neighborhoods across Milwaukee as well. A lot of the infrastructure improvements that we've been making in Milwaukee to address this scourge of reckless driving, which I declared a crisis on my first day in office, have been implemented all over the city of Milwaukee. If you drive around any neighborhood in Milwaukee, you'll see the investments that we've been making to tackle that sort of scourge. And then we're supporting things in the neighborhoods as well, other developments in the neighborhoods too, outside of affordable housing, outside of tackling reckless driving, outside of increasing protected bicycle lanes and other things across the city. When you look at the great things that are happening in Bronzeville, you look at the Thrive on King project, you look at the Bronzeville Center for the Arts that's coming along. When you look at the work that's going to be happening in our infrastructure on Sherman Boulevard in the year's future, when you look at the nearly $15 million that we won from the federal government with a RAISE grant, with the support from United States Senator Tammy Baldwin. When you look at all of these things, we're making an impact in neighborhoods all across the city of Milwaukee, adding to quality of life, and I think making neighborhoods a place where people want to live as well as downtown.
Mayor, I thought it was notable when you discussed public transportation. You didn't mention the streetcar. I remember when it first opened, obviously you weren't mayor yet, when they first broke ground on the project. I remember the original plan that was unveiled was a year after we get the first loop, it's going to go to the lakefront. Obviously that hasn't come to fruition. do you think it's just because unless we get some federal money coming in, it's just not fiscally doable right now? I mean, where is that even on your priority list, and how realistic is it to expect any kind of expansion anytime soon?
I did not mean to mention the streetcar. Look, I have consistently been a supporter of the streetcar since before I became mayor. And I always talk about being a political realist. I'm an economic development realist as well. And the fact of the matter, and I'm glad you mentioned the streetcar, the fact of the matter, whether people in Madison want to agree with it or not, is that the streetcar is an economic development tool that has proven itself. I mean, think about it. When we talk about those luxury high-rises that are coming out of the ground right now, the Couture, which I just drove past just earlier today, at the base of it, the reason why that is able to rise to the ground right now, that's going to redefine our skyline, is because of the streetcar. It's got a streetcar stop right at the base of the building, right? When you look at this other development that's coming out of the ground, Hines, an international development firm that has made its first investment in the state of Wisconsin. And they did that right here in Milwaukee with no public subsidy, no help. They said, this is a place where we want to be. And a large part of that was what? And they cited it, the streetcar. The streetcar did that. When you look at the property values along the route of the streetcar, those property values have risen because of the streetcar. One of the places that has undergone redevelopment and I believe is leased up really fast is a place called, guess what? The Streetcar Flats. You can't make it up. Like, the streetcar is an economic development tool. And if you look outside of Milwaukee, to other cities, mid-sized cities that are trying to also burst through and get to that next tier, cities that are less populated and less dense than Milwaukee have also implemented streetcar systems because they work. And if you go to other places as well, even larger cities, look, the fact of the matter is that when you have fixed rail transit, it creates nodes of economic activity around those stops because developers and investors and store owners have confidence that there will forever be people coming on and getting off at those stops. It's a captive audience. And so the desire has been to expand the streetcar beyond the current footprint. It's always, kind of befuddling to me when people say, oh, the streetcar, it only goes in a circle downtown, and that's it, as if that was the only desire for the streetcar to be. That was never the case, just like it was never the case for Wells Street to stop between Water Street and Plankington. That wouldn't make sense. It was always desired to expand. I mean, just think about that. If you don't expand it, then it can't realize its full potential. Just like a freeway system, it's the same sort of concept. It's the same sort of idea. And if we get to that point, then we'll see more usage, we'll see more ridership, and we'll see more investment along the streetcar route because the formula has already been proven, and proven with tremendous success, with hundreds of millions of dollars of investment already along the current route.
I guess I also wanted to touch on just violence in the city. You've put through Safer City MKE. You talked about Camp Rise. I guess I'm curious, at least especially as it relates to the city's young people, there has been a lot to try to keep them from getting hurt or killed. But we've still seen, I think, more than about a dozen kids who have been killed this year. We had a 15-year-old after the fireworks, a 16-year-old just a couple days later. I guess I'm curious, what do you think isn't working? Like, what more needs to be done to keep kids safe in Milwaukee?
Yeah, part of that is the answer that I gave earlier in terms of what I want to work with the legislature on. Given the fact that we've been able to improve relationships between the city and the state. Like, I get those phone calls. I get the phone calls. I get the text messages when somebody gets hurt, and especially when a kid gets hurt. And it drives me insane. It drives me absolutely insane when I get a call and I see that some child, some minor, some juvenile, some kid in Milwaukee has been shot because it should not happen. It just shouldn't happen. And too many times as well, it's a kid who shot another kid. How on earth are we living in a society? Are we living in a city that doesn't control gun law, but a state that has broader authority on access to guns where kids are being shot and we're doing nothing about it. There's something more that needs to happen here, and that's why I want to work with the state in order to address this issue. So, again, we don't control gun law at the local level, but we are working on initiatives on the front end to keep kids safe and keep them engaged. I mean, I talked about our Camp Rise program. You all know very well the long-standing Earn and Learn Summer Youth Jobs program that's happening right now. A program that I benefited from when I was a young person. I was a participant there as well. Our partners over at Safe and Sound are working and have been working all summer long to engage young people and families and letting them know that if you want to be involved in something, just reach out to us. Just call. You don't have to look it up yourself. Just call and tell us what you're interested in, and we will we'll take some of the legwork out of it for you. We will help to make the connections. We, just a couple of weeks ago, launched our new website, Hello Summer, where we encourage families and kids to log on and see all of the opportunities, whether they want to work, whether they want to eat, whether they want to be in an athletic program with MPS Rec, whatever the case may be. We're saying that we are resource rich in Milwaukee and we want to help. We want to make those connections. And I have been consistently calling on preachers, teachers, mentors, friends, parents, everybody involved in a young person's life to step up and do more. Step up and do more. Because it cannot just outrage me as mayor when somebody gets shot, right? And especially when a kid gets shot. I need everybody to be outraged about it. I need everybody to step up. If you have a kid in your life, whether they're a kid in your immediate family or a kid that you know, all of us have a responsibility, each and every single one of us, to make sure that that kid is on the straight and narrow, doing the right thing. And so it takes all of us. It takes programs like that. It takes all of our involvement. And indeed, I believe it takes the state and the federal government too, but particularly the state, to step up and do more, to step up and do their part to make sure that we do not see more kids being shot and more kids being killed by guns in Milwaukee this year, next year, or any year in the future. All of us have a responsibility in that.
So another group that has been a victim many times of shootings or murders in recent years is victims of domestic abuse, victims of domestic violence. And there are some organizations in Milwaukee doing a great job to address this. But what more can be done on the front end to support these organizations, to support women and sometimes men who are caught in these domestic violence situations before they escalate to a shooting or a murder?
Well, that's another thing where the state's involvement and access to firearms could be very helpful, right? And I would assume that there is probably a correlation between people who should not have guns and people who kill their domestic partner with a firearm. There's probably a correlation there. And if there were better controls on that, then we could stop some of those things from happening. But for us, we've got to continue to do a better job of letting people know about the resources that are out there. And I've joined, since I've been mayor, over the course of the last year, and will continue to do this as well, during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, during Denim Day, joining with community organizations such as HEMAD, to lift up this very important issue around domestic violence, connecting people in our community with resources out there, such as the Sojourner Family Peace Center. There's more that we could do, and all of us, I think, have to raise our voice to that as well. But a key piece of this, though, is that the homicides that we see in Milwaukee are mostly driven by people's unfettered, it seems like, access to firearms, and especially for people who should not have their hands on them in the first place. And that's why we had to continue to work with the state in order to make sure that does not happen. That'd be good for the city, that'd be good for the region, and that'd be good for the state of Wisconsin.
Do you want us to keep? Okay. Mayor, we've talked so much today about the shared revenue deal and your experience in Madison, hammering that out. Would you ever rule out running for a statewide office like governor or U.S. Senate? Got to try to end on a positive note. I don't want to ask a crime question.
Well, I will say this, is that I just got here as mayor, and mayors typically serve a very long time in this office, and there's so much work to do. There really, really is, and I've been focused on this job and doing the best that I can to serve the people of Milwaukee since I took office as mayor, and it's my commitment to continue to serve the people of Milwaukee as mayor. But thank you. But understand, though, that being a political realist, again, going back to that theme, is that there's only so much that you can do from here. And if my experience in Madison over the course of last year tells me anything, is that we need more people in statewide office who have a willingness to create compromise, who have a willingness to bring people together, who have a willingness to build bridges. That's exactly what we're able to do over the course of this last year, and look what we were able to accomplish, right? We got something big done for the city of Milwaukee. So who knows what the future holds? Perhaps one day, maybe in the future, because again, mayors stay here for a very long time. Maybe there could be a run for governor or some other office. But right now, my focus is squarely on the city of Milwaukee and doing the best that I can in the job that I have to support the residents that elected me to do the job of serving as mayor of the city of Milwaukee.
All right, we're going to move on to questions from the audience. I want to thank our panel of journalists. Excuse me. Here come the hard questions.
Uh-oh.
If you have a question, raise your hand. Any questions?
No questions. All right. Oh, Carl. Okay.
Mayor, as a former City Hall reporter, I find it remarkable that the mayor somehow works with the Common Council instead of fighting with them, works with the county executive instead of fighting with them, even works with Republicans in Madison instead of blaming or fighting with them. So assuming you get another 4 years, what does that look like? That I assume you're not done with this kind of effort. What does that look like in the next 4 or 5 years?
I think it looks. I feel some sort of way of being a person in elected office who says it looks like more of the same. But again, as you pointed out, Carl, we've been able to work with the legislature, work with the Republican-held legislature to get something major accomplished, work with the city council in order to advance that and get something major accomplished. And the city will be better off for it. The city won't go insolvent because of it. So it's my desire to continue to work with all parties involved. We're not going to agree on everything, right? There's natural tension between an executive office and a legislative office. I get that. I think council members get that too. We're certainly not going to agree on everything with legislators in Madison. I mean, even though I'm in a nonpartisan office, all of us go and pull a lever in November, and mine happens to be on the Democratic side, and everybody knows it. There's no secret to that. So there's not going to be 100% unanimity, or not unanimity, but uniformness, should I say, when it comes to dealing with the legislature. But there are places along the margins, I think, where all of us are able to work together. That's the space that I want to operate in. How can we get things done to create progress for the people who live in this city? That's what I want to work on. That's what I want to see after my reelection in April and in the next term.
Mayor, you've accomplished a lot in a very short time in terms of shared revenue, bridging Madison, Milwaukee, et cetera. And there are people in this room who know how hard you worked in that in Madison. Maybe you didn't sleep in the Capitol Rotunda, but you were certainly there a lot. You just identified really the issue of the day for yourself and the city and said it's a state issue too, and that's guns. So before you went to the Capitol, you listened to other mayors and other county people, other town people around the state on shared revenue. Do you have any thoughts in terms of what your personal role might be in listening to other mayors, other police chiefs, other council members around the state on the issue of guns so you can be a positive force in Madison in the conversation as opposed to just a bystander?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And before I was elected mayor, I served on the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, and I know that Jerry and Tony are here from the league, so glad to see you guys here. And that was an eye-opening experience for me, having the opportunity to work with and build relationships with other leaders from across the state. And I can tell you this: Milwaukee, of course, it's the anomaly in the room as it relates to other communities around the state, right? If I usually try to relate it to like a familial sort of relationship, the state's the parents, and then the municipalities are the kids. Well, we're the big kid in the room, right? We sit at the big kids table, and for all the things that are different about us, so many things are the same, and I got to realize that and know that when I was a part of the league, and I developed relationships with leaders from southeastern Wisconsin to Eau Claire, right, to Ashland, to La Crosse, and so I think continuing to build on those relationships across the state will put us in a strong position, much like this, right? The shared revenue piece and the increase in monies to municipalities across the state. This is a collaborative effort where everybody needed something. I think a lot of communities need help on guns too. It may be homicides in the city of Milwaukee, but it's probably suicides somewhere else, right? And so if there's space, again, along the margins, that we're able to work together and raise our collective voice on this, then I think there's a possibility to get something done.
Any other questions?
Mayor, you've talked about the pearls along the lake, and you've talked about some of the challenges in different neighborhoods. I'm wondering about the inequities throughout the city and how some places are wonderful to be, other places we're seeing houses being condemned, but very specifically as it applies to traffic. In my neighborhood, somebody might go to a red light, they might go through it, they might use it as a stop sign. How do we improve the safety and the security of our city through the traffic? And I know you've alluded to some of those things, but I'd like you to speak further on it.
Improving safety as it relates to traffic in Milwaukee, traffic safety. Yeah, again, it's a pretty complex problem. I mean, every car out there represents one individual driver, right? And so it's a complex thing to try to get everybody to follow the same set of rules when people have autonomy and they make decisions. I like to point out the fact that much like everything or many things, it's a minority of people who are breaking the traffic rules, the traffic law, right? So I think we should start there. But there are a number of different approaches that we have implemented since I've been in this office and will continue to build upon. Some of those are working with our partners at the Greater Milwaukee Urban League and others to make sure that individuals who don't have a driver's license actually get driver's license and they get the skills that go along with that. Some of the other things are working to make sure that we cut down on the number of vehicles that are stolen that then most likely would drive recklessly in Milwaukee. Some of those are infrastructure improvements, which I alluded to earlier on. Which, if you go in neighborhoods all across the city, you see these pinned-on curb extensions and bump outs. Some people may say that I'm kind of pushing protected bike lanes a lot, and I am. Because that presents an opportunity for folks to have that as a viable transportation option in the city that doesn't take a car to get around, so everybody has access. The other part of that is that those protected bike lanes present an additional barrier to folks who seek to drive recklessly. And then another aspect of that is working with law enforcement, right? Because if all those other things fail, then we need police to step up. We need law enforcement to step up to take action on those folks who make the decision to drive recklessly. And so when I was an alderman, the Milwaukee Police Traffic Safety Unit was launched in my district because I was one of those alders who was out there talking about the importance of work to make sure that we focus in on reckless driving. I was one of those alders who worked with the Fire and Police Commission to make sure police had the authority, the latitude to chase after people who were driving recklessly. And the reason for that is because if people feel like they can go out and do whatever they want to, create their own rules of the road, then you can't have a civilized society. You just can't. You got to check that stuff in, otherwise it grows into the problem that we see now. And it was 7 years of a no pursuit policy, so we worked to get that changed. Part of the reason, one of the other things we did too was not just having a concentrated police force to do that, but we brought in the Wisconsin State Patrol that typically doesn't even patrol in the city of Milwaukee or Milwaukee County, but they also began helping us with traffic enforcement as well. So it was all these things and others that I believe will help us over time to address the issue of reckless driving and traffic safety in the city of Milwaukee.
Okay, one last question.
Hi, Stacy Matson, citizen.
Hi.
Can you speak to Milwaukee's standing as an environmentally responsible city? Where are we lacking? What is the plan to shore up business accountability and things like that? And where does that fall on the priorities compared to gun violence, revenue, sales tax?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I talk frequently about my desire to boost the population of the city of Milwaukee. And I think a big part of that is going to relate to exactly that. Our standing as it relates to the climate, our standing as it relates to the environment, right? So if you look across Milwaukee right now, and I've been supportive of all these initiatives, boulevards all across the city, from the northwest side all the way to the south side. We've worked with the Metropolitan Milwaukee Sewerage District to create bioswales to capture water where it falls to mitigate flooding across the city of Milwaukee. We've worked with Milwaukee Public Schools to take some of those hard surface areas, those gray surface areas, and turn them into outdoor classrooms, these green spaces where students have that sort of access. Was it 2 weeks ago? I signed a climate and equity plan that will help us to be more conscious about the climate, be more conscious about our environment, and create family supporting jobs, particularly for people of color who have been left behind, to get work in green jobs in Milwaukee. And we're going to have to be conscious of that because as the climate continues to change in the United States and around the world, folks will look to places that are climate havens. And when you look across the country, you've got areas of the country, of the U.S. that are prone to hurricanes every year. You've got areas of the U.S. that are prone to, back-to-back hurricanes. You got prone to, tornadoes, rather. You've got areas of the U.S. that are prone to earthquakes constantly. And all of us are heating. But the sweet spot and then there's the issue of water scarcity as well. You factor all those in, and the sweet spot in the country is, guess what? Right here in Milwaukee. It's right here. And so folks will look at us, and it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure that we take our climate, we take our environment into account. And that's another piece of my plan to have a protected bike lane network across the city, reducing the need for people to expand their carbon footprint with cars in the city too. So it's a big part of our priority, and that's why I was happy to publicly sign our climate and equity plan just a couple of weeks ago. And my administration will be working to build that out. Our Office of Environmental Collaboration will be working to build it out and create those opportunities in the years to come. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, any final remarks before we wrap this up?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I need it for a sales pitch.
Okay.
Just a couple of things before you all leave. First of all, I want to thank again our media panel for being here, for all of you for being here. Thanks again to our event sponsor and the Newsroom Pub and the Safe House for being the hosting sponsor of this event. If you're not a member of the Milwaukee Press Club, you should be. And you should see Joette, who is here, our administrator, and she can help you with that. Or you can go to MilwaukeePressClub.org, and there's information about applying for membership. A couple of things, upcoming events. Tuesday, August 8th, we have a Newsmaker Luncheon at the Rotary Club of Milwaukee, featuring former Governor Scott Walker. And on Friday, October 27th, is our Media Hall of Fame at the St. Kate. It's going to be a great event. And one last thing, the mayor really wants this hat, so I'm going to give it to him. We have these great hats, Milwaukee Press Club hats, for sale. The money goes to support the Milwaukee Press Club and the endowment, so good thing. So thank you all for being here. There you go. Wear it proudly.